The chains bit into Marcus Webb's wrists the moment the transport doors sealed behind him. He didn't struggle. 3 years as a UN diplomatic attaché had taught him that struggling against Vethkai restraints only made them tighter. Some kind of biological memory in the living metal, responding to resistance with constriction. So he stood still in the dark, listening to the hum of the ship's engines shift from a roar to a whisper as they broke atmosphere, and counted his breaths. 63 breaths. That's how long it took before the lights came on. The holding cell was circular, walls made of something that looked like obsidian but breathed. Marcus had learned that word in his second month of Vethkai immersion training. The walls breathed, expanding and contracting in a rhythm that matched no human heartbeat but felt deliberate nonetheless. The air tasted of iron and something floral he couldn't name. 2 guards stood at opposite ends of the room. They hadn't moved since the lights came on. Their armor was black with silver threading that pulsed like veins, and their faces were hidden behind smooth masks that showed only 2 things: stillness and judgment. Marcus had been taken from the Kyra station summit 40 minutes ago.
No explanation.
No charges read. One moment he was standing beside Ambassador Chen, translating a heated exchange about mineral rights in the outer belt. The next, 4 hands, firm, unhurried, certain, had closed around his arms and walked him out of the room so smoothly that 3 seconds passed before anyone realized he was gone. That precision scared him more than anything. The door opened. Not with a hiss or a grind, it simply ceased to exist for a moment, and a figure walked through, and then the wall was solid again. She was tall. Not the towering, inhuman height of the guards, but tall enough that Marcus had to look up slightly, which he suspected was intentional. Her skin was the deep violet of Vethkai high caste, not a color he'd seen often, because high caste didn't typically handle their own problems. They sent people. The fact that she was here, in person, in this room, meant something had gone wrong at a level his briefing documents had never prepared him for. She wore no crown. She didn't need to. The way the guard's posture changed, barely, almost imperceptibly, a millimeter of tension entering their spines, told him everything. This was Sereth Velkor, 2nd daughter of the Vethkai matriarch, 7th in line for the Obsidian throne. She had 3 known names in diplomatic files and a 4th that was classified at a clearance level Marcus didn't possess. She looked at him the way a surgeon looks at a patient, not unkindly, but without sentiment. You translated the outer belt negotiation incorrectly, she said. Her standard was flawless. 3 times. Marcus kept his voice level. I translated exactly what Ambassador Yarath said. You translated what Ambassador Yarath intended you to hear. She tilted her head, a gesture so slight it could have been a trick of the light. There is a difference. One of those translations, if accepted as accurate, would have ceded jurisdictional rights over Sector 7 Kale to the Drevathai Consortium, which would have given them legal access to the Velmoran relay, a relay that, as of 6 hours ago, has been confirmed to carry the navigational codes for the entire Vethkai outer fleet. The silence that followed was total. Marcus ran the translation back through his memory. The outer belt session. Yaratha's 3rd statement. He'd rendered it as a standard mineral rights concession. The phrasing was technical, nested in 3 layers of Vethkai formal register that even experienced translators struggled with. But if the underlying phrase root was Velsora instead of Velsoreth, a single phoneme, then the meaning didn't shift. It inverted. He felt cold. I didn't know, he said.
No.
She stuttered him. You didn't. That is the only reason you are alive and not charged with espionage. A pause. The reason you are here is different. She moved to the center of the room, and the guards, without a word, without a signal Marcus could detect, stepped back. Ambassador Yarath has disappeared from the station. The Drevathai representative has gone silent. Someone on your delegation support staff accessed the translation archive 7 minutes before you were taken. She clasped her hands behind her back. You are the only person in that room who heard the original phrase spoken, processed it, and can confirm which word was actually used. You need my testimony. I need your memory. Her eyes, 4 of them, arranged in a slight arc, gold fading to amber at the edges, held his without blinking. And I need something else. She reached into the fold of her outer garment and withdrew a small object, placed it on the curved shelf that extended from the wall beside him, stepped back. It was a translator's seal. His translator's seal, the one that had been on his wrist when he was taken. "I am invoking the Velcarith Accord," she said quietly. "Article 9. Emergency Partnership Claim. You will work with me. Directly. Without oversight from either of our governments." She let that land. "And, before you answer, you should know that the Drevathai have already made a move. 40 minutes ago, a ship matching their courier profile entered Vethkai space without clearance." She looked at the seal on the shelf. Then, at him. "The Accord requires your consent. I am asking for it." The briefest pause. "I am also telling you that if you refuse, there is no version of the next 72 hours that ends well for either of us." Marcus looked at the seal. Then, at her. Then, at the wall that had been a door. He picked up the seal. Her name, she told him on the second ship, was not Seraph. That was a title, a positional designation that meant second-born toward the light, used in formal contexts and diplomatic files. Her name was Kor. Just Kor. She said it without ceremony, the way someone discards a mask they've grown tired of carrying. Marcus filed that away. In Vethkai culture, a given name shared outside family lines was either an insult or an intimacy. He couldn't tell which yet, and he was smart enough not to ask. The ship was smaller than the transport, a runner-class vessel, 2 crew, no markings. The kind that didn't appear on port logs. Kor stood at the navigation console with her back to him, speaking in low tones to the pilot in a dialect Marcus didn't recognize. Not High Vethkai, not trade standard. Something older, with a clicking undertone. He spent that time reviewing what he knew and cataloging what he didn't. What he knew. Ambassador Yarath had deliberately buried a jurisdictional transfer inside routine mineral language. Someone had tipped him off that the translation archive would be accessed, which meant the archive breach was planned, not opportunistic. Kor had moved within minutes of the breach, which meant she had her own intelligence stream running parallel to official channels. What he didn't know, why she'd invoked Article 9 personally instead of sending an operative. Why she'd told him her name. And what, specifically, the Drevathai wanted from the Velmoran relay badly enough to risk open provocation. "You're cataloging," she said, without turning around. He didn't ask how she knew. "It's what I do." "You do more than translate." She turned then, leaning against the console with her arms crossed. "Your file lists 12 years in diplomatic service, 6 active conflict zones, and a commendation from the Terran Security Council that's been redacted twice." She watched his face. Whoever redacted it wasn't thorough. Most people aren't. What was it for? He met her eyes. Keeping a negotiation alive when one of the parties decided a knife was faster than a contract. She was quiet for a moment. Did the negotiation succeed? Partially. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite respect, not quite reassessment. Something in between. "The relay," she said, "does not carry navigational codes. That was the cover story I fed to my own intelligence office to see who moved on it." She watched him process that. What it actually carries is an authentication sequence. For a weapon. Marcus kept his breathing steady. What kind of weapon? The kind that ends arguments permanently. She turned back to the console. The Drevathai don't want to use it. They want to threaten with it. There is a difference, but only if the authentication sequence stays out of their hands. She pulled up a nav chart, expanded it with 2 fingers. The relay is on a station called Veth Morith. 14 hours from here. There is a 9-person Drevathai team already en route, with a 6-hour head start. And your people cannot move without triggering the Velmoran Compact, a non-intervention treaty my mother signed 11 years ago that I cannot unilaterally override. A beat. Which is why I am here, on an unmarked ship, with a human translator, operating under an obscure accord that technically places us outside normal chain of command. Marcus looked at the nav chart. Veth Morith was a mid-belt station, civilian infrastructure, no military garrison. How many people are on that station? 43 permanent residents. A rotating research staff of 12. She said it plainly, which was its own kind of weight. If the Drevathai reach the relay and extract the sequence, they will not leave witnesses. He stood up. "What do you need from me?" She crossed the space between them, for steps, deliberate, and stopped close enough that he could see the light pulse in the silver threading of her collar. She reached into her garment again. This time what she placed in his hand was not a seal. It was a weapon. Vethkai construction, compact, warm from her body heat, heavier than it looked. He recognized the design from security briefings. A disruptor, short range, non-lethal at minimum setting, lethal at 2 above that. I need you to understand what we are walking into, she said. And I need you to choose to walk in any way. He looked at the weapon in his palm. Then, at her. You could have sent anyone, he said. An operative. A soldier. Someone trained for this. Yes. But you came yourself. And you brought me. He watched her face. Why? The silence lasted long enough to mean something. Because the authentication sequence is voice-locked, she said. To my mother. A pause, measured and deliberate. And I have my mother's voice. Another pause, shorter. And, because the last human who stood in that summit room and almost caught Uratha's deception, without any of my intelligence resources, without knowing what he was looking for, was you. She held his gaze. I needed someone who pays attention. Marcus closed his fingers around the weapon. 14 hours, he said. 13 now. Veth Morith Station was older than the treaty that was supposed to protect it. Marcus could see that in the hull, the layered plating from 3 different construction eras, the docking arms added in stages, the original Vethkai stonework still visible in the core structure beneath everything that had been built around it. The station had survived a war and 2 renegotiations of its status. It looked tired but permanent. They docked at a secondary port on the station's shadow side, a berth used for maintenance vessels, rarely monitored. Core moved through the access corridor without hesitation, which meant she'd studied the layout. The pilot stayed with the ship. It was just the 2 of them. The relay room is in the station core, she said quietly as they walked. 3 levels down. 1 access corridor, 2 possible entry points. The research staff will be in the upper levels at this hour. She glanced at him. If we encounter civilians, we redirect them. We do not discuss what we are here for. We do not explain. And, if we encounter the Drevathai team, we don't let them reach the relay. He noted the simplicity of that. Not we stop them or we neutralize them. Just, we don't let them. The kind of sentence that collapsed all options down to 1. They were 2 levels down when they heard it. Not voices. Movement, the particular quality of silence that follows controlled movement, the kind trained people make. A door sealing softly. A footstep that landed a fraction too lightly to be casual. Core stopped. So did Marcus. They stood in the corridor without speaking for 3 seconds. She held up 2 fingers. Then, pointed left, then, right. He understood. 2 of them, splitting to cover both entry points. He thought about pointing out that they discussed only 9 Drevathai, then realized that if she was counting 2, it meant the other 7 were already somewhere in the station, and she'd chosen not to say that aloud because there was nothing to gain from saying it aloud. He checked the disruptor's setting. 2 above minimum. They split. The left corridor was narrower, lit in amber, emergency secondary lighting, which meant someone had cut the main power to this section. Smart. It reduced visibility and killed most electronic monitoring. Marcus moved along the wall, keeping his footsteps off the center of the deck plating where the resonance was highest. The air had changed, not just station air anymore, but the sharper, drier smell of Drevathai environmental suits. Recent. Close. He saw the figure at the relay room door a half-second before the figure turned. The disruptor was already in his hand. He didn't fire. The figure was small. Vethkai coloring, pale silver instead of violet. Young, not a Drevathai operative. A child, 10 or 11 years old by human reckoning, wearing a researcher's badge 3 sizes too large, standing at the relay room door with a hand terminal and an expression of total, frozen terror. She'd been trying to access the room. Her fingers were still on the door panel. Marcus lowered the weapon, put a finger to his lips. The child stared at him. Then, the lights went out entirely. In the dark, 2 things happened simultaneously. The relay room door opened, from the inside, which meant someone had already bypassed the lock from another entry point, and, from the far end of the corridor came the sound of a brief, sharp struggle that ended in silence. Core's voice, low and controlled, came through the earpiece she'd given him before they split. I have 1. Room is compromised. 2 more inside. Marcus didn't answer. Speaking would give his position. He reached in the dark for the child's arm, found it, and moved her backward against the wall. She was trembling but silent, smart enough to be quiet. He kept himself between her and the open door. Light bloomed from inside the relay room, a work lamp, directional, flooding the corridor with yellow-white. Two figures moved inside. He could see them through the open door, Drevathai operatives, environmental suits, both focused on the relay terminal with the concentrated urgency of people on a deadline. They hadn't looked toward the corridor yet. He checked the disruptor. Made a choice. Raised it. The shot took the first operative at the base of the suit's neck, the standard vulnerability point, covered in every security briefing he'd ever attended. The operative dropped without a sound. The second spun, fast, and Marcus moved left as the return shot cracked past him and scorched the wall. He fired again, missed, the operative was already moving, and then Core was through the other entry point and the second operative had two problems at once, which was one too many. It ended in 4 seconds. Core stood over the second operative, breathing controlled, armor scored along one shoulder. She looked at Marcus. Then, at the child standing against the wall. Her expression changed. Not surprise. Vethkai High Caste didn't show surprise, or had learned not to. But something moved behind her eyes that hadn't been there before. She looked at the child for a long moment, then back at Marcus, and he understood without being told. The child had been trying to lock the relay room from outside. Not to access it. To seal it. She'd seen the operatives and done the only thing she could think to do. Core crossed the corridor in 3 steps and knelt in front of the child. She spoke, not in trade standard, not in the formal dialect. In something soft, with round sounds, that Marcus recognized after a moment as children's register. The register Vethkai used with the very young. The child answered. A flood of words, half-coherent, describing what she'd seen. Core listened without interrupting. Then, she placed one hand on the child's shoulder, said something brief and firm, and stood. 7 more in the station, she said to Marcus. She saw them come in. She knows where they went. He looked at the child. She's been tracking them. She's the station commander's daughter. She knows every corridor. Core picked up the work lamp from the relay room floor. And she is very angry that strangers are in her home. The child looked at Marcus. Her 4 eyes, still gaining their adult coloring, caught between silver and gold, held something he recognized across every species barrier he'd ever encountered in 12 years of diplomatic work. Resolve. The next 40 minutes were the most precise piece of improvised coordination Marcus had ever been part of. The child, her name was Velshan, which meant third light before dawn, knew the station the way children know the places they've grown up in, not as maps but as memory. She knew which corridor carried sound and which absorbed it. She knew where the maintenance shafts ran parallel to the main passages. She knew that the research staff had sealed themselves in the upper observatory when the lights cut, because that's where the emergency protocol told them to go, and she knew the emergency protocol because her mother had made her memorize it on her 8th birthday. She led them. Core moved with the fluid efficiency of someone whose training had cost years and left marks. Marcus moved with the particular adaptability of someone who had spent a career in rooms where the rules kept changing and survival meant recalibrating faster than everyone else. Velshan moved with the fearless certainty of a child who had decided that fear was a thing to be used rather than surrendered to. They took the remaining 7 operatives in 3 separate actions, in 3 separate sections of the station, over 38 minutes. 2 were found attempting to override the life support system, which told Marcus the 9-person team had split into contingencies, and the relay was only one of them. 3 were at the secondary communications array. 2 were watching the docking bays. None of them expected what came for them. 1 Vethkai Royal, 1 human translator, and a small child who knew every shadow in the building. No civilian was harmed. The research staff stayed sealed in the observatory. The station commander, Velshan's mother, a compact, silver-haired woman with the exhausted eyes of someone who'd been listening to what she couldn't see for 40 minutes, met them at the observatory door when it was over and said nothing for a long moment. Then, she looked at her daughter and said, in trade standard, so everyone could hear, I told you the emergency protocol was important. Velshan said something in children's register that Marcus suspected translated to I know. I told you, but he let it go. Core walked back to the relay room alone. Marcus followed. She stood in front of the terminal for a moment. The work lamp was still on the floor, throwing long shadows. She reached out and placed her hand on the relay casing, not activating it, just touching it. The gesture was quiet enough that Marcus looked away. When she turned, her face had returned to its formal stillness. "The authentication sequence is intact," she said. "The relay is secure. And the weapon it authenticates will stay where it is." A pause. "My mother will know, by morning, what happened here. What I did and how." She held Marcus's gaze. "And she will know that I invoked Article 9. That I claimed a partnership. Will that cause problems for you?" The pause that followed was longer than her other pauses. And he'd learned to read her pauses. "It will cause a conversation," she said finally. "A long one." "I can write a report," he said. "Official testimony. What I heard in that summit room, what Yaratha's phrase actually was. It would give you documentation. It would give us both documentation." She tilted her head. "You would do that?" "We were partners for 14 hours, he said. "That kind of thing tends to come with obligations." She looked at him for a moment in the lamplight. Then, she did something he hadn't seen from her before. She let the stillness go. Just for a second. Something real moved across her face. Not relief exactly, and not warmth exactly, but something that lived in the space between them. "The Velcarath Accord," she said, "does not have a standard termination clause." She let him sit with that. Article 9 partnership claims are reviewed after 90 days. If both parties agree to continue, they may. He held her gaze. "And if only one party agrees, then the accord expires." A beat. Both parties must choose. From the corridor behind them, they heard Velshan explaining to her mother, in rapid and confident Vethkai, exactly how she'd helped seal the relay door and exactly what the two strangers had done afterward, her voice carrying the unmistakable tone of someone who had decided this story was hers to tell and intended to tell it well. Kor's expression shifted again, the smallest possible softening at the corners of her eyes. Marcus looked at the weapon still in his hand. He set it on the console beside her, carefully, with a deliberateness that meant something in Vethkai gesture language, returned freely, not discarded. She looked at it. Then, at him. 90 days, he said. Outside the relay room, in the amberlit corridor of a station that had survived a war and 2 renegotiations and, now this, Velshan's voice rose in emphasis over some disputed detail, and her mother's voice answered, steady, tired, and, underneath both, unmistakably, trying not to laugh. Kor picked up the weapon, tucked it back inside her garment, and, for the first time since Marcus Webb had stood in chains in a breathing cell and counted 63 breaths to keep himself calm, she said nothing at all, and it was enough.